The stars above Earth had always seemed peaceful. For thousands of years, humans looked up and wondered if they were alone. On the morning of March 15th, 2347, they got their answer. 300 alien warships appeared beyond the moon, their hulls reflecting the sun like dark mirrors. Captain Jinho Park stood on the bridge of the UESS Indomitable, one of Earth's 12 deep space military ships. He was 42 years old, a career officer who had spent 20 years preparing for threats that everyone said would never come. Now those threats filled his viewing screen. The alien ships were massive, each one 3 times the size of anything humanity had ever built. Jinho ordered his communication officer to send a message. It was simple, translated into mathematical patterns that any intelligent species should understand. It said that humanity came in peace and wanted to talk. He waited for a response, his hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. The bridge crew was silent, barely breathing. The response came 30 seconds later. A beam of pure white light shot from the lead alien vessel. It crossed the distance between Earth and Moon in less than 2 seconds. The beam struck the eastern coast of Australia. From space, Jinho watched as a circle of fire spread across the continent. Cities vanished. Forests burned. The ocean itself seemed to boil. 43 million people died in those first seconds. Commander Vexthor of the Talaxian Empire watched the destruction from his command throne. He was not cruel by the standards of his people. He was simply efficient. The Talaxians had conquered 200 worlds over the past 5,000 years. They had learned that quick, overwhelming violence prevented long, costly wars. These humans needed to understand their place immediately. The Talaxian fleet moved forward. They launched fighters and dropped ships. Earth's orbital defense stations opened fire with railguns and missiles. The weapons were primitive, but numerous. A few Talaxian ships took damage. 2 smaller vessels were destroyed when nuclear missiles penetrated their shields. But it was not enough. Not nearly enough. In Seoul, Dr. Hana Kim watched the news feeds from her laboratory deep underground. She was the head of the Seoul Space Defense Initiative, a project that had been developing theoretical weapons for 15 years. Most people called it a waste of money. Earth had no enemies, they said. Why spend billions on weapons we would never use? Now Hannah watched those screens and felt her stomach turn to ice. The alien ships were landing in every major city. Their soldiers poured out, tall figures in black armor, carrying weapons that fired bolts of superheated plasma. Human soldiers fought back with rifles and tanks. It was like fighting with sticks and stones. The Battle of New York lasted 6 hours. The Battle of Beijing lasted 4. London fell in 3. The aliens were not just winning. They were crushing humanity with ease that felt almost bored. Jinho's ship was one of the last fighting. The Indomitable had retreated to the far side of the moon, along with 5 other surviving vessels. They were out of missiles. Their railguns were overheated. Jinho looked at his crew, men and women who had trusted him to lead them. He knew what he had to do. He ordered a ramming course. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. The Indomitable accelerated toward the nearest enemy ship, engines burning at maximum. But before they could reach it, 3 plasma lances cut through the frigate's hull. The ship broke apart. Jinho was thrown from his chair. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. He found himself in an escape pod with 4 other crew members, watching through a small window as his ship died. The pod's automatic systems fired, sending them away from the battle. Jinho watched the stars spin as they fell toward Earth. He had failed. They had all failed. Within 72 hours, the war was over. 3 billion humans were dead. The aliens landed occupation forces on every continent. They began sorting survivors, processing them like cattle. Some were marked for slave labor. Others were marked for experimentation. The rest were marked for elimination, considered too weak or too old to be useful. Colonel Minho Choi was in Bizen when the city fell. He was a Marine commander, 45 years old, with 2 daughters and a son. When the alien soldiers came, he fought until his ammunition ran out. Then he fought with his knife, then with his hands. They beat him unconscious and threw him in a transport truck with 50 other prisoners. When Minho woke up, he was in a processing center. Aliens in white suits examined each human, scanning them with devices that hummed and clicked. They separated families without hesitation. Minho watched a mother scream as they took her children away. He watched an old man collapse when they marked him for elimination. Minho's turn came. An alien scanned him, its 3 eyes examining the readout. It marked him for labor and pushed him toward another group. As he stumbled forward, Minho memorized every detail of the facility. The guard positions, the weak points in the fence, the timing of the patrols. He was a soldier. Soldiers always looked for ways to fight back. Doctor Yuna Song was not as lucky. She was a neurobiologist, 38 years old, who had been working at a university in Daejeon. The aliens identified her as a scientist and took her to one of their research facilities. They wanted humans who understood biology. They wanted people who could help them study the new species they had conquered. The facility was a nightmare. Yuna was forced to assist in experiments on living humans. The aliens wanted to know how much pain a human could endure. They wanted to know which diseases affected humans most efficiently. They wanted to catalog everything about human biology, treating people like laboratory animals. Yuna did what she was told because the alternative was death. But she also did something else. She memorized everything. She recorded data in her mind. She watched how the aliens worked, how they thought, how they saw humans. She waited for a chance, any chance, to use that information. 6 months after the invasion, Earth was a broken world. 2 billion more humans had died from disease, starvation, and systematic elimination. The Talaxian Empire had established administrative zones across the planet. They stripped minerals from the mountains. They harvested the oceans. They took everything and gave nothing back. But in the ruins and shadows, something was happening. Humans were organizing. They were hiding weapons. They were planning. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They assumed that breaking humanity's military meant breaking humanity's spirit. They were wrong. In a hidden base beyond Neptune, Admiral Sorahan gathered what remained of Earth's space fleet. 17 ships. That was all that survived. Her officers told her to surrender. They said continued resistance would only bring more suffering. SOR refused. She had just received a message from Dr. Hana Kim on Earth. The message was encrypted, brief and terrifying. Dr. Kim had been working on something in her underground laboratory. Something that humanity had considered too dangerous to build in peacetime. But this was not peacetime anymore. The message ended with a single question. How far are we willing to go to survive? Sora looked at the stars. She thought about the billions who had died. She thought about the humans in processing centers, in labor camps, in research facilities. She thought about what the aliens had done to her world. Then she sent her reply. As far as necessary. The rain fell on the ruins of Bizen, mixing with ash and blood to form dark rivers in the broken streets. Colonel Minho Choi crouched in what used to be a subway tunnel, watching 3 alien soldiers patrol the surface above through a crack in the ceiling. His resistance cell had 15 people. They had 8 rifles, 4 pistols, and enough ammunition for maybe one more fight. 6 months of occupation had taught Minho many things. He learned that the aliens called themselves Talaxians. He learned that they considered humans to be animals, useful only for labor or study. He learned that they were arrogant, careless, and believed nothing on Earth could truly threaten them. He also learned how to kill them. The Talaxians wore advanced armor, but it had weak points at the joints. Their weapons were powerful, but needed time to recharge between shots. They rarely posted more than 3 soldiers in any patrol, because they could not imagine humans being dangerous. Minho signaled to his team. They moved through the tunnel silently, reaching a position beneath the patrol. One of his fighters, a young woman named Haijin, had been a competitive archer before the invasion. Now she used a crossbow loaded with armor-piercing bolts. Silent, deadly, perfect for ambushes. The trap was simple. Minho's team emerged from the tunnel behind the patrol. Haijin's bolt took the first alien in the neck joint. The creature dropped without a sound. The second alien turned, but Minho was already there, driving a sharpened metal bar through its armor's weak point. The third alien managed to raise its weapon, but 5 bullets from 3 different rifles cut it down. 30 seconds. 3 dead aliens. The team stripped them of weapons and equipment, then vanished back into the tunnels before reinforcements could arrive. It was a tiny victory in an unwinnable war, but Minho would take what he could get. The retaliation came 2 hours later. The Talaxians surrounded a nearby settlement of 200 humans. They announced that for every alien killed, 100 humans would die. Then they opened fire. Minho heard the screams from 5 kilometers away. He punched the tunnel wall until his knuckles bled. His second in command, a former police officer named Dio, put a hand on his shoulder. "We knew they would do this," Dio said quietly. "Does that make it easier?" Minho asked. Daiho did not answer Doc in the Talaxian research facility, near what used to be Dacian. Dr. Unisong cleaned blood off her hands for the 4th time that day. The aliens had brought in 50 new test subjects. They wanted to see how quickly different human age groups succumbed to a new biological weapon they had developed. Yuna had been forced to prepare the subjects. She had been forced to inject them. She had been forced to document their suffering. The youngest had been 6 years old. The oldest had been 70. None of them survived more than 3 hours. The Talaxian scientist she worked under, a creature named Zilnak, examined the data with satisfaction. It spoke in its own language, which a translation device converted to words Yuna could understand. Excellent results. This pathogen will be useful for cleansing other primitive worlds. Your species serves well as a testing ground. Yuna nodded and kept her face blank. Inside, she burned with rage so intense it felt like it would consume her. But she had learned to hide her feelings. The aliens could not read human emotions well. They thought her compliance meant acceptance. They were wrong. Every night, when the aliens left her alone in her small cell, Yuna reviewed everything she had seen. She had a perfect memory, trained through years of scientific work. She cataloged every security code she glimpsed, every patrol route, every biological agent, every weakness in their procedures. She did not know if she would ever escape. She did not know if the information would ever matter, but she collected it anyway, because it was the only weapon she had. High above Earth, Admiral Sorahan sat in the command center of her hidden base. It was built into a large asteroid in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Neptune. The 17 surviving ships of Earth's fleet were scattered across this region. Hiding among millions of rocks and ice chunks. Sora was 51 years old. She had gray in her hair and scars on her hands from the desperate repairs they had made in those first terrible weeks. Her fleet was not just hiding. They were preparing. The encrypted messages from Dr. Hana Kim had been coming regularly. Each message contained technical specifications, mathematical formulas, and instructions. What Kim was proposing violated every treaty Earth had ever signed. It violated every principle of ethical warfare. It was monstrous. It was also their only chance. Sora's chief engineer, a man named Junho Lee, stood before a holographic display showing Kim's weapon designs. Junho was 35 years old, brilliant, and had lost his wife and 2 sons in the initial bombardment. He pointed at the display with a shaking hand. "This is not a weapon," Junho said. "This is an apocalypse device. If we build this, if we use this, there is no going back. We become something worse than them." Sora looked at her crew. 20 officers filled the command center. All of them had lost everything. All of them were exhausted. All of them were terrified. "We are already worse than them," said Captain Jino Park. He had been rescued from his escape pod 3 months earlier, half dead from radiation exposure. "We have to be, because being better than them means being dead." The room fell silent. Sora knew that this moment would define everything that came after. She could order the fleet to surrender. She could try to negotiate. She could save the lives of her crew and condemn the rest of humanity to slavery and extinction. Or she could do the unthinkable. "Begin construction," Sora said. Her voice was steady. "We build Dr. Kim's weapon. All of them. On Earth, in her underground laboratory beneath the Himalayas, Dr. Hannah Kim worked without sleep. Her team had grown to 30 people, all scientists and engineers who had escaped the occupation. They worked by candlelight and battery power, afraid that any significant energy signature would attract alien attention. What they were building was called the Entropy Cascade device. Kim had developed the theory 5 years before the invasion, then locked it away because no sane person would ever construct it. The device did not just destroy matter. It unraveled the fundamental forces holding atoms together. Once activated, it created a chain reaction that spread through any connected mass, consuming everything within a planet's gravitational field. Kim's assistant, a quantum physicist named Taiho Kwan, checked the calculations for the 100th time. His family had died in the first week. His home city no longer existed. He had nothing left except his work. "The mathematics are sound," Taiyao said. "It will work. It will definitely work." "That's what I'm afraid of," Kim replied. She looked at the device on the workbench. It was small, the size of a human heart. Such a small thing to kill an entire world. They would need to build dozens of them. They would need to smuggle them onto alien transport ships. They would need volunteers willing to carry these devices into the heart of enemy territory, knowing they would never come home. A young woman entered the laboratory. Her name was Minji Bei. She had been an intelligence officer before the invasion. Now she was something else. Something harder. "I'll do it," Minji said. She had been listening from the doorway. "I'll carry the device." Kim looked at her. Minji was 29 years old. She should have had a whole life ahead of her. Instead, she was volunteering for a suicide mission that would murder billions. "You understand what this means?" Kim asked. "You will have to be captured. You will have to endure processing, transport, and slavery. You might be subjected to experiments or worse. And even if everything works perfectly, you will die when the device activates." Minji's face was calm. "My younger brother was at the Talaxian research facility in Daejeon. They used him to test biological weapons. He was 8 years old. So yes, I understand what this means. And yes, I volunteer." Kim nodded slowly. She looked around at her team. They were building instruments of genocide. They were planning the extermination of entire species. They were becoming monsters, but the monsters had come to Earth first, and humanity was simply learning to survive in a monstrous universe. "Then we begin," Kim said. "May whatever gods remain forgive us." In the tunnels beneath Bizan, Minho received an encrypted message on a salvaged alien communication device. It was from Admiral Sora Han. The message was brief. Prepare for large-scale operations. Assets incoming. New weapons available. We are going to war. Minho read the message 3 times. Then he smiled for the first time in 6 months. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had been beaten down, broken, and humiliated, and was now being told he could finally hit back. He gathered his resistance cell. He told them that things were going to change. He told them that Earth was preparing something big. He did not tell them exactly what. He did not need to. They could see it in his eyes. Hope. Terrible. Vengeful hope. The device sat in Agent Minji Bei's hand, no larger than a coin. It was gray, smooth, and slightly warm to the touch. Inside that small piece of metal was enough destructive power to erase a planet. Dr. Hana Kim had explained how it worked 3 times, but Minji still could not fully understand the science. She did not need to. She only needed to know that it would kill billions of aliens. The surgical team will implant it tomorrow, Kim said. They stood in the medical bay of the underground facility. We will place it in a false cavity between your ribs. The Talaxian scanners cannot detect it because it is completely inert until activation. To them, it will look like scar tissue. Minji nodded. She had already said goodbye to the few friends she had left. She had already written letters that would never be sent. She was ready. 46 other volunteers stood ready as well. Some were soldiers. Some were civilians. All were determined. Engineer Junho Lee had designed the delivery method. The Talaxians were transporting thousands of human prisoners off-world every day. They used them as slave labor on their mining colonies, as test subjects for biological experiments, and as workers in their industrial centers. The aliens barely checked their cargo. They considered humans too primitive to pose any threat. That arrogance would kill them. Dr. Tayo Quan briefed the volunteers on activation procedures. Each device had a quantum transmitter built into it. When Admiral Sora Han sent the activation signal from her fleet, all 47 devices would trigger simultaneously. The volunteers would not need to do anything except be in the right place at the right time. You will not feel pain, Tayo promised, though his voice shook. The cascade effect is instant. One moment you exist. The next moment you do not. No suffering. No fear. Just nothing. Minji wondered if that was supposed to be comforting. It was not. But she appreciated that Tiho tried. The surgery took 4 hours. When Minji woke, her side ached, but the device was invisible. She looked exactly like she had before. Just another broken human in a broken world. She spent 2 days recovering, then 2 more days preparing herself mentally. On the 5th day, she walked deliberately into a Talaxian patrol. The aliens captured her without effort. They scanned her, processed her, and loaded her onto a transport vehicle with 80 other prisoners. Minji kept her face blank and her eyes down. She acted defeated, traumatized, helpless. The Talaxians expected nothing else from humans, that the transport took them to a processing center near the ruins of Oons, Seoul. There, aliens in white uniforms sorted the prisoners. Minji was marked for off-world labor transport. They loaded her and 10,000 other humans into the cargo hold of a Maz. Civ alien ship. The ship lifted off 3 days later. Minji stood in the packed cargo hold, surrounded by crying children and silent, hollow-eyed adults. The ship would take 2 weeks to reach the Talaxian homeworld. 2 weeks to position herself at the heart of the enemy empire. 2 weeks to wait for Admiral Han's signal. 2 weeks to think about what she was going to do. In the Kuiper Belt, Admiral Sora Han oversaw the final construction of humanity's revenge fleet. The 17 surviving ships had been completely rebuilt. Engineer Junho Lee and his team had worked miracles, combining salvaged alien technology with desperate human innovation. The UESS Indomitable had been rebuilt from scrap. Captain Jinho Park walked through its corridors again, but it felt different now. The walls were lined with weapons that should not exist. Entropy torpedo tubes, quantum disruptors, biological dispersal systems. Things that made nuclear weapons look clean by comparison. Jinho's new crew was assembled from survivors of a dozen different ships. They were haunted, angry, and ready to kill. He stood before them in the briefing room and explained their mission without softening it. "We are going to commit genocide," Jinho said flatly. "Not against soldiers. Not against military targets. We are going to kill entire planets. Civilians, children, everyone. The aliens did this to us, and we are going to do it to them 100 times over." He waited for protests. There were none. Every person in that room had lost everything. They were past mercy, past morality, past everything except the need to make the aliens pay. On Earth, Colonel Minho Choi received supply drops from orbit. Admiral Han's fleet had managed to smuggle weapons down to the resistance cells. Not just human weapons, alien weapons. Things that fired plasma and disrupted molecular bonds. Things that could finally hurt the occupiers. Minho distributed the weapons to his fighters. His resistance cell had grown from 15 people to 200. Similar groups existed in every occupied city. They had been coordinating, planning, waiting for this moment. When Admiral Han gave the signal, they would rise up simultaneously. The Talaxian occupation forces would find themselves fighting an entire planet at once, but the ground war was only a distraction. The real attack would happen far from Earth. In the research facility near Daejeon, Dr. Yuna Song received a message hidden in her food tray. It was written on a tiny piece of paper in code. The message was simple: extraction in 3 days. Be ready. Yuna's heart raced. She had been trapped for 6 months, forced to help the aliens torture and kill her own people. She had documented everything, memorized everything, but she had begun to lose hope that it would matter. Now someone was coming for her. She spent the next 3 days preparing. She stole a data crystal and copied every file she could access. Security codes, biological weapon formulas, facility layouts, guard schedules, everything. She hid the crystal in a waterproof container and swallowed it. On the 3rd night, the power went out. Emergency lights flickered on, then died. The facility went dark. Yuna heard gunfire, screams, and the distinctive sound of plasma weapons. She ran to her cell door. It was already open. A figure in black combat armor stood in the hallway, carrying a rifle that glowed with alien technology. "Dr. Song?" The figure asked in Korean. "I'm Lieutenant Soman Park. We are getting you out." Yuna followed Soman through the dark corridors. They passed dead Talaxian guards and freed human prisoners who fled in all directions. The facility was in chaos. Soman led her to the roof, where a stolen alien aircraft waited. They lifted off as the entire building erupted in flames below them. "How?" Yuna gasped. "The Resistance has new weapons," Soman said, "and new orders. We are evacuating all high-value personnel. You are one of them. Admiral Han wants you on her flagship." The aircraft flew north, staying low to avoid detection. Behind them, more fires bloomed across the landscape as resistance cells across Asia launched coordinated attacks. The occupation forces were finally facing real opposition. 3 days later, Yuna stood on the bridge of Admiral Han's flagship, hidden in the darkness beyond Neptune. She handed over the data crystal she had swallowed, recovered, and cleaned. It contained information about every biological weapon the Talaxians had developed, including the ones they had tested on human subjects. Dr. Hana Kim examined the data with cold satisfaction. "Perfect. Dr. Kwon, Can we reverse engineer these and make them more effective? Taiho looked up from his console. Already working on it. I can have weapons-grade versions ready in 4 days. And yes, they will be much worse than what the aliens created. Sora stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by screens showing the positions of her fleet, the status of resistance cells on Earth, and the locations of all 47 volunteers carrying entropy devices. Everything was in position. Everything was ready. When do we start? Captain Gino asked. Sora looked at the data. Agent Minji Bay had reached the Talaxian homeworld yesterday. The other volunteers were positioned on target planets across the Talaxian Empire. The resistance cells on Earth were armed and ready. The fleet was prepared. We begin tomorrow, Sora said. Send the message to all units. Operation Ragnarok starts at midnight, Earth Standard Time. The bridge crew worked quietly, sending encrypted signals across the solar system and beyond. This would be humanity's answer to the invasion. Not surrender. Not negotiation. Just overwhelming, merciless violence. In her cramped sleeping pod on the Talaxian homeworld, Minji felt the quantum device in her chest begin to warm. The activation signal was coming soon. She thought about her brother. She thought about Earth. She thought about all the people the aliens had killed. She did not pray. She did not cry. She just waited for the signal that would turn her into a weapon. On Earth, Minho gathered his fighters in the tunnels. 200 people with alien weapons, ready to fight. He did not tell them about the entropy devices. He did not tell them about the genocide that was about to happen. He only told them one thing. Tomorrow, we take our world back. Whatever it costs. Whatever we have to do. We take it back. His fighters roared their approval. They were beyond caring about the cost. The aliens had already taken everything. Now humanity would take everything from them got in her laboratory. Dr. Kim looked at the weapons they had created. Entropy devices. Biological plagues. Psionic bombs. Stellar ignition charges. An arsenal of horrors that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. She thought about a question. Someone had asked her months ago. Will we still be human after this? Kim knew the answer now. No, they would not. They would be survivors. They would be conquerors. They would be monsters. But they would be alive, and their enemies would not be. Agent Minji Bay stood in the central plaza of the Talaxian capital city when the device in her chest activated. For one perfect moment, she saw the alien sun setting over impossible towers of crystal and metal. She saw thousands of Talaxians walking the streets, living their lives, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Then the entropy cascade began. It started as a point of absolute darkness in her chest. She felt it for less than a second, a sensation like ice and fire meeting. Then the darkness expanded. Reality itself seemed to crack around her, spreading outward in geometric patterns. The Talaxians nearby turned to look. Their expressions changed from curiosity to confusion to terror in the space of a heartbeat. The cascade spread at the speed of light. Buildings dissolved into clouds of disconnected atoms. Streets unraveled into nothingness. The Talaxians themselves came apart, their complex biology breaking down into fundamental particles. There was no time for pain, no time for fear. They simply ceased to exist. The cascade followed the planet's gravitational field, consuming everything. Within 6 hours, the Talaxian homeworld was gone. Not destroyed, not broken. Simply erased, leaving only a diffuse cloud of particles where a civilization had stood for 30,000 years. The same thing happened on 46 other worlds. Simultaneously, the Vryn colony at Proxima Kelver vanished. The Kelfir industrial world of Talanus 7 disappeared. Mining outposts, research stations, agricultural colonies, military bases, all gone in the same 6-hour window. 47 planets, home to over 90 billion sentient beings, ceased to exist. The galaxy reeled in shock. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Entire species going extinct in a single day. The Confederation's emergency networks lit up with distress signals, but there was nothing to respond to. Just empty space where worlds had been dot and humanity was not finished. Admiral Sora Han watched the confirmation signals appear on her display. All 47 entropy devices had activated successfully. 47 worlds gone. She felt nothing. No satisfaction. No horror. Just a cold, mechanical sense of tasks completed. Phase 2, she ordered. Captain Jinho Park's rebuilt fleet emerged from hiding. 17 ships, upgraded with salvaged alien technology and human ruthlessness, crossed into Confederation space. They did not try to hide. They broadcasted their presence on all frequencies, challenging any ship to stop them. Evrin sent a defense fleet. 30 warships, state-of-the-art, crewed by experienced warriors. They expected a battle. What they got was slaughter. Jinho's flagship, the Indomitable, opened fire with entropy torpedoes. Each torpedo carried a miniaturized version of the device Minji had carried. When they hit the Vrin ships, they did not just destroy them, they erased them. 30 ships became clouds of disassociated matter in under 3 minutes, but the torpedoes were just conventional weapons compared to what Dr. Taiyo Quan had created, the psionic shatter. Bomb was loaded onto a stealth drone and sent into Vrin space. Most species in the Confederation were telepathically linked to some degree through quantum entanglement. It allowed instant communication across vast distances. It was their greatest advantage. Taiho had turned it into their greatest weakness. The bomb did not explode in the traditional sense. It released a quantum pulse that traveled through the telepathic network, carrying a signal specifically designed to cause maximum neurological damage. Every Vrin connected to the network felt it. Pure agony transmitted directly into their brains. 300 million Vrin died instantly, their nervous systems burning out. Another billion died over the next 6 hours as the effect cascaded through secondary connections. The survivors, cut off from their network to save themselves, went insane from the sudden isolation. The Vrin, one of the 3 founding species of the Confederation, ceased to exist as a functional civilization in less than a day. On Earth, Colonel Minho Choi led his resistance fighters in a coordinated uprising. The moment Admiral Han's signal came, every resistance cell on the planet attacked simultaneously. They hit power stations, communication hubs, and supply depots. They ambushed patrols and besieged occupation headquarters the Talaxians had never faced organized resistance from humans before. They had always fought scattered, desperate survivors with primitive weapons. Now they faced coordinated attacks using their own technology against them. The confusion was total. Minho's cell assaulted the Bizan occupation center with stolen plasma weapons. The Talaxian garrison fought back, but they were outnumbered and unprepared. Within 4 hours, Minho's fighters had overrun the facility and executed every alien inside. No prisoners. No mercy. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In Tokyo, resistance fighters used captured alien aircraft to bomb Talaxian command centers. In Cairo, they released biological agents that Dr. Hanakim's team had designed specifically to target Talaxian physiology. In Moscow, they detonated nuclear weapons hidden beneath occupation headquarters. Earth was done being a victim, but the ground war was still just a distraction from the main assault. Engineer Junho Lee had created something even more terrible than the entropy devices. He called it the Stellar Ignition Device, Stars burn in a careful balance between gravity and nuclear fusion. Junho's device disrupted that balance, forcing a star into premature nova. The first target was the Kelthir home system. The device was delivered by a stealth ship, planted in the star's core, and activated. The star exploded. The Kelthir homeworld and all 7 of its colony planets were vaporized. The radiation blast sterilized everything within 50 light years. 60 billion Kelthir died instantly. The survivors, scattered across distant colonies, watched their sun explode from across the galaxy. Humanity detonated 11 more stellar ignition devices over the next week. 12 core systems of the Confederation simply vanished in fusion fire. Dr. Yuna Song, now working aboard Admiral Han's flagship, deployed the biological weapons she had helped reverse engineer. But these were not the same pathogens the Talaxians had tested on humans. Taiha and his team had improved them, made them more contagious, more lethal, more targeted. They released the plagues on 17 heavily populated Confederation worlds. The diseases spread quickly, jumping from host to host, killing with 98% efficiency. The affected species had no immunity. Their medical technology could not keep up with the speed of infection. Entire planets became graveyards within weeks. The galaxy tried to respond. The remaining Confederation fleets assembled to stop Earth's rampage. They outnumbered humanity's ships 100 to 1. They had superior technology. They had thousands of years of military experience. None of it mattered. Captain Jinho led his fleet into the Battle of Kelver Station. The Confederation had assembled 2,000 warships to defend the strategic station. Jinho had 17 ships. The battle lasted 6 hours. Humanity won. They used entropy torpedoes to erase capital ships. They used biological weapons to infect crew compartments. They used quantum disruptors to disable shields. They used kinetic impactors accelerated to relativistic speeds to punch through any defense. And when the enemy tried to retreat, Jinho chased them down and killed them all. No survivors. No prisoners. Just total annihilation. The galaxy watched in horror as battle reports came in. Earth, a species that had been considered primitive 6 months ago, was systematically exterminating advanced civilizations. The death toll climbed into the hundreds of billions. Entire species went extinct. Worlds burned. The Confederation tried to negotiate. They sent peace envoys, offering to withdraw from Earth, to pay reparations, to surrender unconditionally. Admiral Sora Han received their messages. She deleted them without responding and ordered the attacks to continue. Mercy was not part of humanity's vocabulary anymore. On the ruins of Earth, Colonel Minho walked through a liberated city. The Talaxian occupation forces were dead or fled. Humans were emerging from hiding, celebrating their freedom. But Minho saw the cost. Half the city was rubble. Bodies lay in the streets. Starvation and disease were already spreading. They had won their freedom, but Earth was broken. And the revenge humanity was taking across the galaxy was breaking something else. Something deeper. Minho found Dr. Unisong's former research facility. It was abandoned now, the aliens dead or evacuated. He walked through the laboratories where they had tortured humans. He saw the equipment, the test chambers, the disposal units. He understood why humanity was doing what it was doing. He understood the rage, the need for revenge, the desire to make the aliens suffer as Earth had suffered, but understanding did not make it right. That night, Minho sat with his remaining fighters. They had lost 40 people in the uprising, 40 friends who would never see Earth's freedom. He looked at the survivors, saw their hollow eyes and scarred faces. "We won," Deo said quietly. "We actually won, did we?" Minho asked. "Look at what we have become. Look at what we are doing across the galaxy. We are killing billions of civilians. We are using weapons that should never exist. We are becoming exactly what we hated about them. Daeho was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe that is what survival requires. Maybe there is no such thing as winning cleanly." Minho did not answer. He looked up at the stars, where humanity's fleet was still hunting, still killing, still taking revenge. He wondered if there would be anything left of humanity's soul when the killing finally stopped. If it ever stopped out in space. Admiral Sora Han received reports of total victory in the Kelver sector. The Confederation's remaining forces were fleeing in all directions. Humanity controlled dozens of systems. Their enemies were broken, scattered, and terrified. She should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt nothing at all. Just an empty space where her emotions used to be. "Admiral," Captain Jinho said, "we have achieved strategic dominance. The Confederation no longer exists as a functional entity. What are your orders?" Sora looked at the star map. Red markers showed destroyed worlds. Yellow markers showed occupied systems. Blue markers showed targets yet to attack. There were so many yellow markers. So many targets left. "Continue operations," she said. "We do not stop until they are all gone." "All of them?" Jinho asked quietly. Sora met his eyes. "All of them." 18 months after the invasion began, the war was over. The Galactic Confederation no longer existed. Its founding species were extinct or reduced to scattered survivors hiding in remote systems, living in constant fear that humanity's hunter fleets would find them. Ambassador Hana Kim stood before the Galactic Assembly, which was no longer much of an assembly. Only 300 species remained out of the original 2,000. The rest were dead or had fled to dark space, hoping humanity would forget about them. Those who remained gathered on a neutral station, desperate to avoid Earth's anger. Kim looked nothing like the scientist who had worked in an underground laboratory 18 months ago. Her hair was gray now, despite her age. Her eyes were cold and empty. She wore the uniform of the Terran Empire, black with silver trim, designed to intimidate. It worked. "The terms are simple," Kim said in a voice that carried across the silent chamber. "Absolute submission or total extermination. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. You will obey humanity or you will die. These are the only options." A Vryn survivor, one of the few thousand that remained of a species that once numbered in the billions, stood trembling. Its telepathic voice came through translation devices, weak and frightened. "Please, we have already lost everything. Our homeworld is gone. Our people are nearly extinct. What more can you take from us?" Kim's expression did not change. "Everything. We can take everything. Your choice is to serve or to join your homeworld in oblivion." The Vryn collapsed, sobbing. No one helped it. They all knew that showing sympathy to Earth's enemies was dangerous. The galaxy had learned to be very careful around humans. Admiral Sora Han commanded a fleet of 2,000 warships now. They had been built from salvaged alien technolo. GY, constructed in shipyards orbiting Earth and the Phi. Moon. Humanity had gone from 12 deep space vessels to the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen in less than 2 years. The ships were scattered across what was now called Terran space, which included 400 star systems. Each system had a human military governor. Each system had occupation forces. Each system lived under martial law. Sora walked through the flagship's corridors, returning salutes from crew members who looked at her with something approaching worship. They called her the savior of Earth. They sang songs about her victories. They named their children after her. She hated every moment of it. In her private quarters, Sora sat alone and looked at pictures of Earth before the invasion. Green forests, blue oceans, cities full of people living normal lives. That world was gone. Earth had been rebuilt, but it was different now. Harder, colder, completely militarized. The planet that had valued art and philosophy and peaceful exploration now valued only strength and revenge. Children grew up learning to hate aliens. Schools taught military tactics instead of literature. Every resource went toward building more weapons, more ships, more tools of destruction. Earth had survived. But Earth had also died on that first day when the Talaxians fired. Captain Jinho Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable above a planet called Talanus Prime. It had been a Kelthir colony once, home to 6 million aliens. When humanity arrived, the population surrendered immediately. They had heard what happened to planets that resisted. Jinho's orders were to establish occupation and extract resources. The planet had valuable minerals that the Terran Empire needed. He implemented the orders efficiently. The alien population was moved to labor camps. Their cities were stripped for materials. Their culture was erased. It was exactly what the Talaxians had done to Earth. That night, Jinho sat in his quarters and tried to remember why he had become a soldier. He had joined Earth's Space Force to explore, to protect, to serve humanity's better nature. Now he was an occupier, a conqueror, a monster wearing a uniform. He poured himself a drink and toasted the empty room. To victory, he said bitterly. May we someday forgive ourselves for winning. On Earth, Colonel Minho Choi had been promoted to Governor General of the Talaxian occupied territories. It was a title that meant he ruled over thousands of alien refugees and prisoners of war. They were the survivors of a species that once numbered in the hundreds of billions. Minho walked through a processing camp where Talaxian families huddled in prefabricated shelters. They looked at him with the same fear he had seen in human eyes during the occupation. Children clung to their parents. The elderly sat in silent despair. They knew their species was finished. A young Talaxian female approached him, speaking through a translation device. Please, my child is sick. She needs medicine. Can you help? Minho looked at the child. She was thin, weak, covered in sores from malnutrition. He thought of his own children, vaporized in the first bombardment. He thought of the millions of human children the Talaxians had killed or enslaved or experimented on. He turned away without answering. Later, his second-in-command Daiho found him sitting alone in his office, staring at nothing. You should have helped that child, Daiho said quietly. Why? Minho asked. They did not help our children. Because we are supposed to be better than them. Minho laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. We stopped being better than them the day we decided to survive. Now we are just stronger than them. That is all that matters. Dr. Yuna Song ran the Alien Research Division of the Terran Empire. Her job was to study captured alien biology, technology, and culture. It was the same work she had been forced to do in the Talaxian facility, except now humans were in charge. She told herself it was different. She told herself they were only studying volunteers, only examining willing subjects, only conducting ethical research. But late at night, reviewing her reports, she saw the similarities. The clinical language, the detached observation, the way they reduced living beings to data points. One of her assistants, a young researcher named Jiwan, showed her a report on Talaxian neural structures. The methodology was sound. The research was valuable. It was also based on invasive procedures conducted on unwilling subjects. This is wrong, Jiwan said, her voice shaking. This is exactly what they did to us. Yuna wanted to disagree. She wanted to explain the difference. But she could not find the words because there was no difference. They had become the thing they hated. I know, Yuna said finally. But we do it anyway. Engineer Jung-Ho Lee designed the monument at the ruins of Canberra. It was a black pillar 5 kilometers tall, visible from space, inscribed with the names of every human who died in the invasion and occupation. 3 billion names. It took years to etch them all at the top of the monument, in letters that could be seen from orbit. Was a message in every known galactic language. Never again. Junho stood at the base of the monument during the dedication ceremony. Millions of humans gathered to pay respects. They cried for their lost loved ones. They celebrated their victory. They swore that no alien would ever threaten Earth again. But Junho noticed something. Not one person questioned what humanity had done to achieve that victory. No one mentioned the 57 worlds they had destroyed completely. No one talked about the 300 billion aliens they had killed. No one acknowledged that Earth had committed atrocities that made the Talaxian invasion look small by comparison. The monument said, never again. But Junho wondered what it meant. Never again would humanity be victims? Or never again would anyone, human or alien, show such cruelty? He suspected he knew the answer. 50 years later, the Terran Empire ruled half the galaxy. New generations of humans grew up never knowing a time before Earth's dominance. They learned in schools about the Great Invasion and the glorious victory. They learned that aliens were dangerous and humanity was superior. They learned to be proud of their empire, that some people remembered the truth. Admiral Sora Han, now 96 years old, sat in a medical facility on Earth. Her body was failing, kept alive by advanced alien medicine that humanity had stolen. She looked out the window at the city rebuilt from ruins. It was beautiful in its way. Tall towers, gleaming streets, advanced technology everywhere. It was also empty of something essential. The warmth, the kindness, the hope that humanity used to have. Captain Jinho Park, retired and gray-haired, visited her. They sat together in silence for a long time, 2 old soldiers who had won a war and lost everything that mattered. Do you regret it? Jinho asked finally. SOR, a thought carefully before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that we had no choice. But I do not regret survival, even if survival required us to become monsters. The Talaxians made us into this, Jinho said. Did they? Sora asked. Or did they just give us an excuse to become what we already were? Humans have always been capable of terrible things. The invasion just removed our restraints. Dr. Hannah Kim, now Ambassador Kim, and one of the most powerful people in the Empire, gave a speech at the 50-year anniversary of the invasion. She talked about sacrifice, about courage, about humanity's triumph over impossible odds. But in her private journals, which would not be discovered until after her death, she wrote something different. We won the war. We saved our species. But we lost our souls. The Talaxians killed billions of humans, and we responded by killing hundreds of billions of aliens. We told ourselves it was necessary. We told ourselves we had no choice. But the truth is simpler and darker. We chose revenge over mercy. We chose genocide over peace. And we did it because it felt good to make them suffer as we had suffered. That is the truth no one wants to admit. We are not heroes. We are survivors who became conquerors, who became tyrants. And the worst part is that we would do it all again. Colonel Minho Choi, now an old man living in the rebuilt ruins of Bizan, watched his grandchildren play in a park. They laughed and ran without fear. They lived in a world where humans were safe, powerful, and unchallengeable. His granddaughter ran up to him, smiling. Grandfather, teacher says you are a war hero. She says you fought the aliens and saved Earth. Minho looked at her innocent face. He could tell her the truth. He could explain what he had done, what he had become, what it costs to survive. But what good would that do? Yes, he said quietly. I fought in the war. I wish I could have been there, she said. I wish I could have helped kill the aliens, too. Minho felt something break inside him. His granddaughter, sweet and innocent, already infected with the hatred that defined post-war humanity, already eager to kill, already seeing aliens as enemies rather than beings. This was humanity's victory. This was what they had won. The galaxy, in its terrified silence, watched the Terran Empire and waited. Waited to see if humanity would ever find its way back from the darkness. Waited to see if the monsters would remember how to be human again. They never did, because the truth that no one wanted to speak was simple and terrible. Humanity had not lost itself in the war. It had found itself. The cruelty, the ruthlessness, the willingness to commit any atrocity for survival. These were not aberrations forced upon them by desperate circumstances. They were always there, waiting for permission to emerge.